It's the Friday Wrap on WNIN FM. I'm John Gibson. Good to have you along on this Friday. Well, Angel Mounds State Historic site recently hosted an agricultural demonstration. The project included cutting-edge technology and traditional native planting techniques. WNIN's Tim Jagalow filed this report.
And then you can go just like that. After you put her in the ground, then you take the stick again and you just lean it like this. You find your next spot.
Squatting near the large prepared garden plot, Shawnee farmer Ryan Conway is instructing a volunteer.
Take it out, you place the corn, and then you cover it again.
Conway and his wife Andrea are demonstrating a traditional corn planting technique that happened at this spot 600 years ago. This was by the Mississippian native tribe between 1100 and 1425 CE. The type of agriculture was identified with ground-penetrating radar and precision excavation by the Archaeology Department of Indiana University, where Conway is an indigenous research associate.
With the ground-penetrating radar and the very high-precision excavation, they were able to discover that the agricultural system here at Angel Mounds was a ridge and furrow-based system. So it wasn't like a mounded hill for corns, beans, and squash. It was a system of high ridges and low furrows. The furrows help prevent erosion, and also they catch water that gets fed back into the soil that gets into them plant roots. And so part of what we're doing here today is working up a living demonstration of that most cutting-edge research so that folks that come here to visit Angel Mounds can see with more detail what kind of agriculture was being practiced here on site.
They fill and haul buckets with dark, wet compost to the front of the neatly dug rows for planting. Andrea says because the spot used to be a farm, the soil is now mostly clay, devoid of nutrients, so the compost is very important. She spreads the compost with her bare hands.
And so that will add nutrition to the soil, but also it helps with the organic matter. It helps retain any nutrients that are in the soil. So we're just adding a little layer of compost, and then we're putting the seed into it, right below it. Compost also retains a lot of water, which in this case, clearly it doesn't seem like we need, but like we don't know what's going to happen in a couple months and it might get dry. So compost helps retain water also.
Joaquin Rangio is Navajo, and he's volunteering. He feels that anyone, native or non-native, can learn from such demonstrations about the people who lived here centuries ago.
They lived the way they did, they ate the way they did, because they were more part of their environment and saw themselves kind of connected in it all. And I think that's something that anyone can learn from and return to. I think it's important to get that connection back when we see ourselves so separated from nature and our food sources, even like what we had before. But
again, Ryan Conway.
So it's something that we all can get back to. It's something that's very much a part of all of us. Like our foodways are what sustain us, and practicing agriculture in this way is a way that also clearly brings people together. So this is work that can be shared with families, with groups of friends, and it's work that we like to do collaboratively.
In the muddy compost, they planted more than 1,000 corn kernels, which will be popping up in a few weeks and could be harvested in September. For WNIN News, I'm Tim Jagalow.
And Tim joins us now on the Friday Wrap. Tim, thanks for the time.
Of course.
All right, well, let's talk a little more about this. Can you share more on the way this discovery was made? It sounds fascinating.
Well, it actually starts all the way back in 2020. Mm-hmm. And, this was based on a study that was released in the fall of 2023. And it was led by Indiana University's Edward Herman. He's a research scientist there. Mm-hmm. But their evidence for these ridge and furrow plantings were date back more than 1,000 years. Right. And the findings were published in the Journal of Field Archaeology in September of 2023. But like I said, this all started in 2020, where Dr. Herman and a native consultant were investigating a spot for possible pollinator garden in that area at Angel Mounds. Right. And so that's when they discovered, or they noticed, that there were dark linear furrows underground, and they kind of figured that they weren't modern And so they started using ground radar, and they were ID'd actually. The furrows were ID'd by slight differences in soil composition, which is interesting to me.
Yeah.
And there was doubt on whether these were actual archaeological finds because these systems hadn't been found this far south in Indiana yet, and so they kind of had to keep finding evidence and confirming.
Right.
They had I wrote this down in 3 parts. A paleoethnobotanist was able to identify plant remains or plant evidence in the furrows, which showed evidence of purposeful planting of beans, maize, and bottle gourds in those furrows at that spot. And so, they looked at macro level at the soil, and they saw that it had been disturbed by mechanical means, like a hoe.
Sure.
And they basically determined that this had been used in 3 eras, starting at 900 AD, and then again at 1100 to 1425. Those would be the Mississippians.
Right.
And again, actually, in late 18th to early 19th century, the pre-Euro-American settlers. And so it was used before and after the Mississippians.
Yeah.
And they expect that because they found it this way, they'll find older and more such sites around southern Indiana.
Yeah, as they keep looking. Well, for those who don't know, could you tell us a little more about the Mississippian people who lived here, basically, centuries ago?
Yes, and I use the word tribe in the story. I don't think that's actually technically the right word. It could have been more tribes as part of the Mississippians, but again, these are the people that are commonly believed to have created what ended up being the mounds themselves. But the mounds are an evidence of a city actually that was at that spot, and a powerful city until around 1200 AD. It was abandoned after about 300 years of use, they think. And the Mississippians, according to Britannica, not my own knowledge, were the last major prehistoric cultural development in North America. And one thing that's common to the Mississippians who existed in the Midwest and the South were the corn cultivation being very important, among other crops.
As it still is, of course.
Yeah, and they're located near the rivers, so that's why. And so, these Mississippian towns usually contain like a large central plaza, and those were more in South Central U.S. and South America. But the Mississippians are the one that brought that to the Midwest, up to this area, this far north. And archaeologists believe that the government of the Mississippians were priest rulers, and they actually use the word cult in their descriptions.
So how long did this garden preparation and this planting take?
Well, like I said, this is a project 5 years in the making,
right?
Because they discovered it, 5 years ago and pronounced their findings in 2023. And so, anyways, the site was already an archaeological dig, so there was already a layer dug down in like a perfect square in that spot,
right?
And so it was already dug down during the investigation. But for the planting, Ryan Conway said it took 3 days basically. So they took some time to prepare the ridge and furrow system based on the Indiana University research. They had to hand set the compost, which you heard happen, and then they had to plant the individual corn kernels, which was about 6 to 7 hours. In a couple of weeks, the corn should start to become visible, and Angel Mounds is planning on Native America Days, September 27th and 28th this year, which at that point it should be fully harvestable, grown.
Yeah, that will be fascinating. Well, in your web post, you mentioned the type of corn that was used. Why is that significant?
Well, it's called Tensquattawa flint corn, and that originated in Prophetstown, which is near West Lafayette.
Okay.
And it's symbolic. It's been preserved for generations. And Ryan said he called it an amalgam corn, a combination of 10 to 15 other strains of corn.
I see.
And again, preserved for generations. And so he thinks this planting is symbolic because of the diversity of the corn strains that went into that, the diversity of the people around here, and the people that have lived here for generations.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Tim, anything else to add that we haven't touched on here?
No, it was just a fun story to cover, and I love stories like this because they do have the fun sounds that go along with it, and they also have the fun visuals to go along with it as well.
That is WNIN's Tim Jagalow. Tim, as always, thank you so much.
No problem, of course.
We appreciate that.